I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. We are waiting for another board member, but we'll go ahead and start the process. Okay, we got everybody seated now. I'm going to go ahead and call the roll for the board, so you'll know who's who, aside from our nameplates. Mr. Burkhart.
Here.
Mr. Shepherd.
Here.
And I am Ms. Joseph. So I am here. I also want you to know that the BZA attorney, Mr. James Bowling, is here. And we also have Andy Herrick, who is county attorney, who is sitting out in front. And Bart Svoboda, who is sitting up here with us, who is the zoning administrator. Francis McCall, who is sitting next to Deputy zoning administrator, and Marcia Alley, who is our recording secretary. I also want to talk about how this works. What will happen is that you will hear a report by staff revealing their thoughts and on the issue at hand. This is going to happen with both. It's going to happen with our first appeal is the appeal of Legal Gun LLC. And then the second appeal is the determination of a homestay request. So the same thing will happen in both of these, is that staff will give us a report, a presentation that will take 15 minutes if they want to use all of that time. The second thing that will happen is the appellant will then, or the appellant's attorney or representative will give a 15-minute presentation of why they have appealed this. At that point in time, we will open the public hearing and you will have an opportunity to speak if you'd like. If you'd signed up, if you haven't signed up, we'll still give you an opportunity if you'd like. One of the things I want to tell you is that the board may ask questions of staff. They may ask questions of the applicant. But there is no dialogue between the public and the board. So we ask you to come up and say what you'd like to say, so we get you on record. And then please don't ask us any questions because we're just not going to answer them. So thank you for that. So far, we've got 11 people who would like to speak. You will each get, not all of you, so don't come up and I'll start talking for 3 minutes. Each and every one of you will get 3 minutes to speak. Okay, and those lights work, don't they, Ms. Alley?
Yes, they do. We
Okay,
checked
so,
those this morning.
so you green, you go on, yellow, you'll be warned, and red will say, please stop. Okay. So at that, I also wanted to talk to you about a little bit about the Board of Zoning Appeals. We're a different animal than you're probably used to. The members of this group applied to the circuit court, and we are appointed by the judges in the circuit court. We're not appointed by the Board of Supervisors. And our job is to look at the words on the page. We've all read your emails. We understand what your concerns are, but we really have to look at how the legislation has been written, what has been requested, and whether or not it fits within the legislation that's in our county code, the zoning ordinance. So I wanted to let you know that even though we may agree with you, disagree with you, it's not something that we're going to take into our decision. Our decision is going to be based on whatever the words on the page say, and that we're just restricted. The judges, we're a quasi-judicial, as Mr. Bowling keeps telling me, we are a quasi-judicial group here. So that's what our job is. Now, the two meetings here today are because there's been a disagreement between the determination that the zoning administrator has written and either someone who has standing, a neighbor, or it's the applicant themselves. So that's why we're here today. And I hope that I was clear in how this will work. And again, seeing citizen participation is always a wonderful thing. So thank you all for caring enough about your neighborhood, your community to do this. So thank you. Now we will start the discussion on the appeal. It's AP 2023-0001. And its appeal of the home occupation HO 2023-002 Legal Gun LLC. And Mr. Svoboda, are you going to present?
I am. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Joseph and BZA members. My presentation should be brief. All the facts of the case have been laid out in the staff report. Once I'm finished, we will take any questions you may have. This is the tax map that shows the parcel in question, which is highlighted in yellow. It's tax map parcel 4334E. It is approximately 3.51 acres. It is zoned RA and is located at 2822 Free Union Road. What we're here to discuss today, and Chair Joseph, you touched on that also, is that the powers and duties of the Board of Zoning Appeals here is to decide whether or not basically that the ordinance was applied directly or correctly, 15.22309 outlines those duties on appeal. Again, the purpose here is to decide whether or not the zoning administrator's decision was correct, whether the ordinance was applied correctly. The appeal does not consider whether the proposed use is appropriate, whether it's in the public interest, or whether the regulation is valid or needs to be amended. That is a different venue, and that is an ordinance revision. This is regarding what we have on the books today. So with this application, it was applied for on January 5th, 2023. And on January 23rd, the adjacent property owners' notices were mailed. On February 17th, an approval was issued for the home occupation, and on March 20th, an appeal was filed. The appeal was appropriately filed, and that brings us to where we are today. On review of the permit, this is a list of not all the criteria, but some of the criteria out of the ordinance. What I tried to do was identify sort of the main issues that were listed in the concerns from area residents. Whether or not how much of the house was going to be used, as 400 square feet is what was requested. They are permitted under the ordinance up to 643 square feet. Whether or not traffic generated by the home occupation would exceed the 10 vehicle trips or 30 round trips per week. We determined it was not. Also, as part of our process, we have contacted VDOT, and what they have told us is that they no longer review home occupations, that the trips generated by the home occupations we have identified in our ordinance do not generate more traffic impacts or impacts that rise to a level of concern for VDOT to get to do a formal review on those. All vehicles and employees, customers, clients related to the major home occupation shall park on site. There's plenty of room for that on this particular parcel. Major home occupations may operate up to 6 days per week and 7 to 8 p.m. And the proposal from the applicant is below those requirements. Also, there were questions about what is prohibited and specifically the gun sales, unless the guns are made on site by one or more family members. So this applicant has indicated that they would occasionally be making a gun on site, and that is permitted as a gun made on site by one or more family members. Also within that section, which is L in 5.2A, there has been some question about any other uses not expressly listed. And so because this use is expressly listed, it doesn't fall under the any other use category. So for a discretionary decision from the zoning administrator about any other use, that's not part of this. I don't have the authority to reach for that, meaning the use is listed, I have to go by what's in the regulation. The zoning official reviewed the zoning clearance based on the criteria listed in 5.2A as we just reviewed. The requirements of the ordinance having been satisfied, the approval was granted. This approval is required because it's a ministerial act. So whether I like the use or don't like the use is irrelevant. It's whether or not it meets the regulation. And once it meets the regulation, I'm required to issue that approval. And in response to the appellant's claims, the first question is whether or not the zoning administrator's decision was correct in issuing the clearance, in reviewing that. And so, yes, with all the requirements of the ordinance being satisfied, the application must be approved. The second question that is before the Board of Zoning Appeals is not whether a home occupation should be approved or disapproved as a policy matter, but whether or not the home occupation satisfies the applicable ordinance. And again, with review and the facts applied, the zoning administrator, in fact, applied the ordinance correctly in determining the home occupation met the requirements under 18.5.2A, and the clearance was issued. Home occupation was issued. Therefore, because the zoning administrator's approval of home occupation was home occupation 02023-0002 was correct, the Board of Zoning Appeals should affirm the determination. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Svoboda. Do we have any questions at this time, or would we like to wait until?
I'd like to wait.
Thank you. All righty. Now we will ask the appellant, Ms. Maupin, if you'd like to present. Does this computer get hooked to that?
Thank you. So I'm Margaret Maupin. My husband and I have lived in our house at 2857 Free Union Road for 41 years. My husband worked at and was proprietor at Maupin Brothers Store in Free Union for over 50 years. I've taught in public and private schools for 35 plus years, and we've witnessed many changes in our neighborhood. We've comfortably watched other very nearby home businesses thrive, and we've had no problem with them as they did not impact us. The approved firearms business does. We own guns. My husband hunts occasionally in the mountains. We have no problem with people owning guns such as these for hunting, sport, or personal safety. This effort is not targeted toward any individual, but rather targeted to convey that we do not believe that approved application follows the spirit of Ordinance 5.2A as it is stated. We do not believe firearms businesses should be located in homes. We have no problem with firearms businesses being located in commercial spaces where they can be regulated and monitored. I'd like to start by thanking the team of staff at County Office Building for their help in answering a myriad of questions as I and others learn how this process works. Jeff Baker, Bart Svoboda, thank you. Marcia Alley, thank you very much. They've been gracious to explain the process and the details to us. And thank you for your time today.
Excuse me, could you speak more into the microphone, please? Thank you.
Yes. As I understand it, Ordinance 5.2A is open to interpretation. And as we present our concerns, that is exactly what we ask you as individuals and as a board to consider with regards to this application for a firearms business in a home. We, and I speak for myself and my husband and the 182 signatories, believe that the zoning administrator's determination to grant a major home occupation permit for a firearms business at 2822 Free Union Road was made in the following error and causes the following harm. Number one, there was no investigation, indeed no personal judgment related to this permit other than a brief site visit of the home to inspect that the square footage was within 400 square feet. There is no formal checklist for this site visit. We have learned that the application for a major home business is purely and simply a ministerial procedure, which means that the application and granting of the permit is simply a matter of checking boxes. Anyone who answers the response-driven application with the right answers and uses less than 400 square feet of the dwelling will get this permit. In talking to the county early on in this process, I was led to believe that within this application process, a representative from VDOT and a representative from ATF would personally review the application and make a determination as to if the permit should be issued. I have subsequently learned from consulting directly with both VDOT and ATF that both entities are not involved and have absolutely no input at this level. In short, the process is the following. The response-driven application is completed by the applicant. A brief site visit occurs, the permit is approved automatically. Did the home visit investigate where firearms would be stored and how secured they would be? Were any requirements regarding storage of firearms presented to the applicant? How can the county in good conscience issue a permit for firearms businesses in homes with no more than a cursory checklist? This is unconscionable in these times. Number two, firearms related businesses in homes have been approved by the zoning department in 12 have been approved in Albemarle County since 2010. The graph indicates when these businesses were approved. Notice that half of these businesses were approved in the last 2.5 years. In addition, this applicant is asking to do a wider array of activities with firearms than any of the previous 11 firearms applicants ever asked to do. Number three, the storage of guns at this location is inconsistent with the county's stated aim to preserve and protect the rural nature of the neighborhood. Public knowledge of the storage of firearms on said premises could invite theft, which would in turn spread into our peaceful neighborhood. Neither the county nor the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms have any requirements whatever as to the security measures needed to safely store these guns, although ATF does require a stop on the firearm when it is sold. Number four, the applicant is required to have a license from the Federal Bureau of ATF as well as the permit from the county. The ATF lists 8 types of licenses for which an applicant can apply, ranging from a collector of curios to a manufacturer or importer of destructive devices. And the county has no knowledge of or access to the type of license for which the applicant has applied. It is an error on the part of the zoning administrator to approve this or any firearms related home business permit with no knowledge of which type of FFL the applicant is trying to achieve. Number five, it is manifestly incompatible with County Ordinance Section 5.2AA, which states that there is to be a balance between encouraging limited home-based economic development with the need to protect and preserve the quality and character of the county's agricultural areas and residential neighborhoods. We believe that permitting a firearms related business in the midst of a family-oriented county neighborhood is antithetical to the interests of an area dedicated to small homes and small farms. We believe that the presence of a gun dealer in our neighborhood will create insecurity, thereby causing harm. This will inevitably change the peaceful character of the area. The applicant describes his business as firearms related services and legal services, including secure storage for long-term travelers like military personnel, legal services for estates with firearms, handcrafted manufacturing of firearms, and transfers. Number six, the introduction of a firearms related business will inevitably be accompanied by a higher crime rate because of the potentially dangerous nature of some gun buyers coming to purchase and repair or store firearms. The location of this permitted use is in a residential area of the rural area zoning district. Prior to the county granting of this firearms-related permit, we in this neighborhood enjoyed a quiet, peaceful world with a low crime rate and a genuine sense of neighborliness and security. We do not want that characterization to be altered. The possibility of this aggrieves 3 abutting property owners who are opposed to this business. 7, the presence of firearms-related business in our area will cause harm by inevitably and ultimately depressing property values. If a firearms business was housed in a home next to you, whether you're in Owensville or on the Rivanna River or in Clearview or in Free Union or in Houndstooth, and you are selling your home, do you think it might negatively affect the selling price? This variable aggrieves the 3 abutting property owners who oppose this business in a home setting. Number 8, the fact that this permit to manufacture and sell guns is within 3 to 6 miles of 2 elementary schools causes harm by posing a danger to said children by exposing them to possible gun violence. Number 9, the presence of a major home occupation firearms related business will cause harm by increasing traffic at an already dangerous section of Free Union Road. The applicant's driveway is immediately adjacent to the Woodlands Road intersection, which has documented accidents. As many of the applicant's customers will be driving north from Charlottesville on Free Union Road, where the line of sight is limited, they will descend a hill and need to make that immediate left turn into the driveway, thus posing a potential traffic hazard. On May 24th, 23, just a few days ago, a completely unsolicited traffic issue at this intersection was posted on Reddit along with the following comments. Person 1, I grew up in Free Union and learned to drive on Free Union Road. To this day, decades later, I slow down when approaching that intersection. Person 2, it's a hidden corner. Person 3, I hate that intersection. Person 4, the corner is super low visibility. Number 10, the criteria that determined whether an application should be approved or denied did not take into account the profundity of community concerns and opposition to the presence of a firearms-related business in the neighborhood, as manifested by the included over 182 signatures on the petition in opposition. If the county is restricting home businesses because of the impact on the neighbors or the neighborhood, as is evidenced on the prohibited businesses list, junkyards, frequent yard sales, on-site pet grooming, etc., then this appeal clearly demonstrates the concerns and the opposition of the local community to the introduction of a firearms-related business in their midst. B, there are 6 parcels owned by 5 individuals which are abutting the proposed business. 3 of the 5, or 60% of the property owners, oppose the approval of this business. This map demonstrates the properties near the proposed business home. Abutting properties are numbered. Owners who are opposed are marked with OP. Number 11, approving this permit violates one of the 3 requirements on the home occupations businesses. 3 run for home occupation business, as stated on the Albemarle County Home Occupations webpage. The 3 requirements are listed below. Without question, approving this firearms related business interferes with the 2nd requirement, which states that, quote, the home occupation must not interfere with the quality and character of the neighborhood. Number 12, this zoning decision does not serve the purpose of zoning, which is stated in Virginia Code section 15.2-2283. Purpose of zoning ordinances, quote, zoning ordinances shall be for the general purpose of promoting health, safety, or general welfare of the public, and further accomplishing the objectives of section 15.2-2200. Allowing a firearms business in a home does not promote health, safety, or the general welfare of the public. 13, Further, Virginia Code Section 15.2-2200 states that, quote, "This chapter is intended to encourage localities to improve the public health, safety, convenience, and welfare of their citizens." We argue that the zoning administrator's approval of this permit is counter to this stated goal in the Code of Virginia. We further believe that other unknown hazards or dangers could arise as a result of this error, any of which could negatively impact the safety and security of our neighborhood and community. In closing, I offer my apology to the applicant that the correct wording was not used to describe his standing with the Virginia Bar to note the associate or non-practicing status. June 2nd was a special day in Virginia and in the nation, National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And 4 days later, I stand here in front of you, the Board of Zoning Appeals, trying to reduce gun violence in this one small way, hoping that this Board of Zoning Appeals can make the best decision for this county to reject the zoning administrator's approval of this application for a firearms business in a home setting. My husband and I have worked hard our entire life to keep our quiet and peaceful 2 acres and our little home that we have lived in for 41 years. We want to continue to enjoy our little piece of the world. And now, right now, with our first grandchild on the way, more than ever, we want a peaceful and safe home. Our concern certainly is as an abutting neighbor, but it is also for the folks who live on Woodlands Road, Garth Road, Owensville, Ivy Farms, Burris Branch, Reyes Ford, Ridge Road, Horseshoe Bend, Millington, Buck Mountain, etc. Please, we implore you, do not allow this firearms business to be located in a home across the street. And further, do not allow any firearms businesses in homes. At this time, would the members of the Free Union Homemakers Club who support and sponsor this appeal please stand and remain standing. And now, would all those in the audience who oppose the approval of this firearms related major home business permit, please stand. Should any harm happen to anyone in the community or in my family related to this approved firearms related home business, who should be held accountable? And 20 seconds to spare.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Sally, according to my what do you call this, run of show? It is up to you now to read the BZA in-person meeting guidelines.
Is my mic working? Yeah. So to anyone who has signed up to speak and to anyone addressing the Board of Zoning Appeals, public comment is welcome during public hearings. A sign-up sheet will be available in Lane Auditorium prior to the meeting for anyone who would like to comment on a scheduled public hearing. If you wish to comment on those matters for which comments from the public will be received, please list your name on the appropriate sign-up sheet. When your name is announced for comment, please come to the microphone, state your name for the record. For uncommon spellings, please spell your name for the recording clerk. If you are with a group of people, you may want to have a spokesperson present your position to the board. In order to give all speakers equal treatment and courtesy, the board requests that speakers adhere to the following guidelines. Come forward to the speaker's podium and state your name. Address comments directly to the board as a whole. Open public debate is prohibited. State your position and give facts and other data to back it up. Keep in mind that there is a 3-minute time limit for public comment per speaker. Give written comments or statements and other supporting material to the recording clerk. Additional guidelines for the applicants and appellants. I think we covered those with your 15-minute time limits, your 5-minute rebuttal period, and anything material-wise that you submit to the BZA, please make sure that you have provided a copy for the recording clerk as well.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Carrington, who is our vice chair, will call your name and you will be given, as we said before, 3 minutes to speak.
Miss Linda Bark.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing me. My name is Linda Barr. My husband and I have lived at 5244 Free Union Road since 1999. As a point of interest, we are gun owners and strongly support the Second Amendment. Our opposition to this business venture has nothing to do with the right to bear arms. We object to this type of business venture in a residential area. Excuse me. The product is potentially dangerous if not properly stored and secured. It puts at risk not only the well-being of the local neighborhood, but the community at large. If located in a commercial area, there is a greater chance of security, cameras, lighting, and police access if needed. I would like to submit a 15-page article from USA Today dated May 28th, 2021, in which there are multiple examples of weapons used in crimes that trace back to home-based sellers. The article also points out the concern of ATF has with monitoring these home-based operations. Post-COVID, there is more than ample retail space available in our community for such enterprises. Do you really want to take a chance and the responsibility for an unintended consequence? Thank you. This goes where?
Marilyn Marshall.
Hello, my name is Marilyn Marshall. I live at 3445 Free Union Road. As a resident of this area, I'm expressing my concern about the proposed gun business at 2822 Free Union Road, Charlottesville, and strongly oppose the ordinance which allows this. One of the issues I have is that appears at least one school-aged child is living in the house, as there is a children at play sign in the driveway. If granted by the ordinance and there are children in the home, then at the very least, schools should be notified of the business and make this information available to parents. As seen by recent events in Virginia, the potential for gun-related issues is high in these situations, especially as there is little or no oversight in terms of security and hours of operation. The ordinance that permits such activity is flawed. Gun businesses should not be allowed in private homes. Thank you.
Karen Yates.
I am Karen Yates, and it's Kerin and odd spelling. I am here specifically to speak to the intersection. It is quite dangerous. I use that intersection at least once a day, and I have lived in the area 15 years. You come upon the intersection from, if you're on 601, knowing that you best slow down, peek over the steering wheel and see if anything is coming the other way. And it is my understanding that small rural businesses have to have safe access. And I do not see that this site has safe access. Thank you very much.
Patricia Dowd.
Take your time.
My name's Patricia Dowd. I have lived in Free Union for scores of years, like many people here, 40 years or 50 years or something. I have a lot of concerns and I think many people are addressing those concerns. So I'm just gonna restrict myself to the one thing is what happens the day you go to pick up your gun that's been altered or repaired in this little 3-acre plot? Where do you fire a gun to make sure it works? Do you fire it at somebody's clothesline? Do you go into a place where you think nobody lives and just fire at the trees and maybe somebody actually lives there? Do you go up some kind of country lane that you know nothing about and try out this firearm and start firing away? I think it really is a danger to all of us. I don't know how that relates to the specifics of this ordinance, but if you don't regard that, why not? There's a deficiency in the ordinance where you don't say, well, what happens once this gun is on the loose in this neighborhood that may be unfamiliar to the people who pick up their gun and start playing with it? That's my biggest concern. My second concern is also the road. It's such a dangerous curve. We always called it death curve in my family. And I don't think that the road has been checked, just the driveway, I believe, past muster when it was considered for one family household, not 30 cars going up and down the driveway to an unfamiliar place. Thank you.
Rana Gray.
My name is Rana Gray. That's spelled Ronna, rhymes with iguana. So my husband and I have been Free Union residents for 40 some years. We are gun owners ourselves, and we're not interested in taking away anyone's right to own a gun. However, we are concerned about having a firearms related home business in a rural neighborhood. It makes no sense that a dog grooming business is prohibited, but a gun business is acceptable. 182 people have signed a petition requesting that the gun permit be denied for 2822 Free Union Road. 3 out of 5 abutting property owners are opposed to this in-home firearms permit. Does a public hearing take into account these facts, or is this hearing a foregone conclusion? And I also agree that that intersection is a death trap. Thank you.
Carl Peppercorn.
Hello, I'm Carl Pfefferkorn, which rhymes with nothing at all. And it's P as in Paul, F-E-F-F-E-R-K-O-R-N. My wife and I have been property owners on Ridge Road in the neighborhood and raised our family there for coming up on 30 years. And so as a local resident, I received this petition, which notes that we have serious concerns about the types of people who will be using this service. Well, I am that type of person and I wish to use this service. I don't know who they're talking about, but of course I can guess. I'd like to point out that firearms are a part of rural life. I have used them to deal with rabid animals threatening my children, to deal with predatory coyotes, and of course for hunting. And the mere fact that this gentleman, who I don't know, haven't met, but hope to, is applying for a federal firearms license. Well, every FFL dealer that I have dealt with, and it has been quite a few, has a greater knowledge of firearms than the average member of the Virginia bar. The ATF sends their agents to Clark Brothers to learn federal firearms regulation from employees who, I promise you, do not have 7 years of higher education. This gentleman is doing everything right, everything in accordance with the rules. We should welcome him. And as I said, I fully intend to use his services. I need his services. If we use this process, as well, frankly, we are today, to impose undue burdens on a man who is following all the rules, what message do we send to the less scrupulous members of our community? The message is that following the rules is perhaps a fool's game. Best to keep quiet and trade your firearms on the sly. This is known as moral hazard. It means inducing people to do the wrong thing. The right thing is to reject this appeal and to allow this gentleman to pursue his trade at home and in peace. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Mr. John S. I can't read your last name. I apologize.
Good afternoon. My name is John Swartzwelder, and I was in the third grade before I could spell it. So SWARTZWELDER. I live in the said neighborhood, and I have two primary concerns. One, which I see overall flawed application process here. It's my understanding that there are two prerequisites. ATF has to approve the application, and then the county has to approve the application. ATF has 8 categories, as Mrs. Moffin referred to, all the way from high explosives to small handguns. However, the details of those licenses are not provided until the approval process is complete. So how can one make an informed decision without that information? Echoes of we'll pass the bill and we'll read it later come to mind. I think that information would be essential into your decision-making process. Secondly, I'm a former Air Force pilot and a retired FBI agent. And in my career as an FBI agent, I had interaction with ATF frequently. And my experience was that most individuals who have a proclivity to apply for this license, first and foremost, like to make guns, repair guns. And essential to that process is test firing the weapon. So from my viewpoint, it's inevitable if this is approved that we're going to hear gunfire in our neighborhood. I would plead with your body to take those comments into consideration, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. April Holmes.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and to ask the Board of Zoning Appeals to rescind this permit. My name is April Holmes and I'm a resident of Free Union. I drive past the residence in question several times a week and offer a few thoughts related to this appeal. A Scientific American article provided with the appeal documents cited a study of gun-related homicides over a 17-year period. The study found that gun homicides increased in a given area when the number of gun dealerships within 100 miles went up. These homicides occurred even as non-gun killings declined overall. At a time when gun violence has increased dramatically throughout the country, surely purchasers in this area have enough sources for buying firearms without additional such businesses being located in residential areas. I understand that the applicant has stated that no ammunition will be provided on site. And I think some others have pointed this out. It's difficult to imagine that potential buyers would be willing to pay for a firearm without testing it first. What safeguards and monitoring are in place that would prevent the purchased weapons from being used in that neighborhood? And this is a question about the appeal process. Apparently, it wasn't a requirement for the appeal that the appellants collect signatures of people who were opposed to the approval of this permit. Will BZA members find that these signatures and the opposition that they represent hold any bearing, legal or otherwise, in its determination? I sincerely hope so. Finally, as a county resident, I've enjoyed the tranquility of Free Union for almost 40 years, and I'm very troubled that locating such a business on our area could damage the peace and character of our beautiful community, not to mention the safety and security of its residents. I urge BZA to rescind the permit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Teresa Gilly.
Just to reiterate, gun violence does go up in the vicinity of this type of business in our home. So I understand that a dog grooming home business is not allowed in Albemarle County. This is reasonable as dogs are unpredictable as their owners and the home business owner can be as well. So this common sense applies to our concerns around this business near neighbors and schools. There are far more appropriate locations for a gun business. Thank you.
Thank you. Joan Payne Courier. Hope I got that right.
Hi. Joan Payne Courier. I live on Ridge Road. I've been there about 30 years. So there is a gun culture in America, in Virginia, and in Albemarle County. In times past, I wasn't worried that my neighbors hunted or armed themselves for safety reasons in our rural community. But this time has passed. Gun culture has become an unregulated, manic institution. Anything you say in concern for any regulations can get you shot. Having a request for a gun business in my neighborhood in this climate is extremely scary. The application synopsis made available is vague. First, altering of existing firearms. The county code allows for guns that are made on site by one or more family member. But when I hear altering existing firearms, I wonder if fitting special barrels, stock, or trigger mechanisms is considered making a gun. Is it now a new gun? Seems a stretch. Guns made in a neighborhood community? Not a good idea. Second, secure storage of firearms. This sounds like a responsible, mindful enterprise, but in a state with no laws governing what secure means, it is scary. By Virginia law, when children are in home, they must have some security. But again, what does it mean? A lock on the door? Our state does not follow federal rules designed to secure storage. And who's going to know about these guns? Everyone. And will our criminal elements be choosing the correct driveway? Or will they knock nicely on the door next door and say, pardon me, are you the people with the 400 square feet of guns? Because I'm here to steal those. Secure storage should fall, in my opinion, to police, sheriffs, and Navy fire departments. Our veterans and military personnel should be able to store them for free. Third, legal services. If properly qualified to offer advice, this is certainly the least concerning, unless it means helping to buy and sell online. Who regulates that? There are 8 FFL licenses a firearms dealer can apply for. So what can we expect? It's an unknown. A zoning change was allowed for a gun business without even knowing exactly what it will entail. My neighborhood will be changed forever. How do I sleep? I'm going to end with something near dear to our hearts. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for a common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves. Okay, so this should not be a partisan issue. This is about domestic tranquility and the general welfare of the whole community.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this? No, we've got one person ahead of you. No, you.
My name is Robert Ruff. I live at 410 Houndstooth Court. I'm essentially the applicant's next door neighbor across the street. I probably own more guns than everybody in this place combined. I'm not, however, dumb enough to keep them anywhere on my premises. It's a crazy thing to do. I think the applicant, if you listen to this, if you read his application, has told you on his face that he can't possibly comply with the ordinance. The ordinance does not allow the sale of firearms unless they're being manufactured. We do manufacture firearms in the state. It's you can go to Williamsburg and watch them, the blacksmith shop, creating the parts and whatever. I have two sons that served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. They can assemble a assault weapon in about 30 seconds. They can disassemble it, clean it, and put it back together in less than a minute and a half. All this gentleman is going to be doing is assembling a weapon. I assemble things in my house all the time. I put tires in my car. It doesn't make me a car manufacturer. I attach a TV to the wall. It doesn't make me a TV manufacturer or a carpenter. At worst, he buys an unregistered, unlicensed, unmarked lower receiver and drills 2 holes in it with using a drill press. Takes about 30 seconds at the most, puts 2 screws in, and now he has a working firearm. This is not manufacturing, this is assembling. I'm sorry you've fallen for this ruse, but the fact that he has a federal firearms license tells me that what he's really going to be doing is trading firearms, selling firearms, and he's not manufacturing. That's ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, there's everyone for being late. But at my age, I guess that's, oh, is it okay if I get up? You want to get up and speak? Good, okay, thank you. Thank you, board members, for this opportunity. We're not here for the following reasons. We're not here to discuss the First Amendment, our sacred right to keep and bear arms. Secondly, we're not here to discuss the NRA, founded in 1871 for the purpose of marksmanship. We are not here to discuss neighbors.
Sir, you're talking to us.
Neighbors, differing points of view. I only address the audience because
No, don't
these-
address them. No, well, you're not talking to them, you're talking to us, so
I
continue doing
apologize.
that.
Please
Thank you.
forgive me. Now I know how I will proceed.
Thank you.
So we're not here to discuss neighbor having different points of view with neighbor. Imagine that people might have differing points of view. We call it a free society. Rather, we are here to discuss the ideas expressed in this application. So let us raise our discussion to the discussion not of personalities or history, but of ideas. The term transfer is the final and most salient term of this request. Transfer.
Transfer. Transfer is a comprehensive legal term. I don't, okay. It can be found in all legal dictionaries. It means to convey. According to the Uniform Commercial Code already adopted by all states in 1967, transfer is a comprehensive term, all-inclusive, that is used to convey the act or actions of conveyance. What word do we think of in conveyance? Can mean such as sale, lease, license, lien, gift, and so on. I humbly ask the zoning board here to reflect on the use of this term in this setting. That is my humble request, that you reflect. Thank you
Thank
again.
you. Sir in the yellow sweater.
I'm the guy in the yellow sweater, and I'm Major General retired Douglas E. Caton. I've served 36 years in the military, so I know a little bit about guns and gun control. This man is my next door neighbor. I have a farm, Four Winds Farm, right next to his house. I am concerned about my grandchildren and my animals being shot or at least entertained as targets. And I also am concerned about the quality of people and the people who seek out gunsmiths and people who repair, transfer, or otherwise assemble weapons. I don't think it's appropriate in a residential community to have a gun shop or anything related to a gun shop. And I'm formally against the approval of this man's requirement for a home business in a residential neighborhood right next to my farm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, if not, we're going to close the public hearing and the matters before the board, and we'll begin some discussion on this. Mr. Shepherd, would you like to start, please?
Okay. First, just a couple of quick sort of introductory and general things. I appreciate all the folks who have come out and spoken on this. It's democracy in action. It's a great thing. I want to say in general, as I approach this, there are many concerns that have been expressed here that are sort of a general nature.
I'm sorry, I did not do my diligence here. I didn't read my run of show properly. I apologize. Yeah, please hold that thought. He'll be back. What I would like to offer now is a 5-minute rebuttal from anything anyone's heard, and we're going to start with the rebuttal will come from two sources. It will come from the zoning administrator or the county attorney, and it will also come from Ms. Maupin. Okay, so we're going to start with zoning administrator or county attorney, whoever would like to respond to some of the things that they've heard. And Mr. Herrick, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Andy Herrick, I'm the Deputy County Attorney. I appreciate the comments that have been made today. I appreciate the concern of the appellant and the neighbors that have spoken today. But as Mr. Svoboda indicated at the outset, this really isn't about what the ordinance should read. It's about what the ordinance does read and whether or not the zoning administrator correctly interpreted the zoning ordinance as it currently exists. I think largely absent from the appellant's presentation today was citation to section 5.2A of the zoning ordinance, which is in your packet beginning on page 47. And I would suggest to you all that to the extent that there's any grounds for reconsidering the zoning administrator's determination, it has to be based on something in this zoning section, again, 5.2A, that's on pages 47 to 49 of your packets. I did note that Ms. Maupin did cite a provision of that section, but not the whole section. And so part of it reads, with the purpose of intent subsection at the outset of that, the regulations in the section are intended to ensure that authorized home occupations will be compatible with other permitted uses, with the agricultural areas and the residential neighborhoods. And this is the important part, I think, by regulating the scale, hours, external activities, external appearance, and other impacts that may arise from a home occupation. So you can see that the purpose of the home occupation regulations in the county code is primarily dealing with external impacts of the home occupation. Now, subsection L has specific provisions about specific types of home occupations that are not allowed. But for the most part, as you look through this, you'll see that there's regulations that deal with the location and area occupied by home occupation. There's a subsection that deals with exterior appearance. There's a section that deals with visitors and sales, a section that deals with traffic generated, parking, outdoor storage, days and hours of operation, numbers of vehicles used, number of home occupations. These are the sorts of things that the home occupation regulations are designed to address. And Mr. Svoboda and his team had done everything by the book. They have taken this code and they've applied it. They've compared the application with the zoning ordinance as it's currently written and determined that there is a match. The only basis for this board to overturn or to modify Mr. Svoboda's determination would be if the board somehow found that it was in violation of this section 5.2A. The other concerns, though we certainly hear them, are not part of the zoning ordinance and not part of the decision process that's being considered by the zoning administrator or by the Board of Zoning Appeals. We think that the zoning administrator handled this correctly, and we'd ask that you affirm his decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Maupin, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
First of all, does it matter that 5.2A, which is a local ordinance, also follow Virginia code? Because in my talk, I was talking to you about Virginia code and the fact that having a firearms business in a home does not seem to follow the Virginia code that I cited. Secondly, we don't need FFLs, which is what the applicant was talking about in an email that I just received when I got to this meeting today. There are 50 FFLs in the area. 50, that's 50. That's Charlottesville, Afton, Earlysville, Ruckersville, Keswick, Waynesboro, Scottsville, Fork Union. We don't need these. I'd be interested in knowing how long VDOT has not been reviewing home occupations, and I know I can't ask questions. I'm just saying that I'd be interested to know that because it was implied to me in no uncertain terms that VDOT would be reviewing this. My communications with VDOT indicated that it has not been part of the procedure for quite some time. Listening to Mr. Svoboda's arguments against each and every point that we've delivered, it seems clear that there is indeed no effective appeal. An appellant can waste $743.36 and devote countless hours of research and work, gather 182 signatures in opposition to absolutely no avail. Does the public know? Does the Board of Supervisors know that there's absolutely no judgment in every single application for a major home business? What other decisions by the zoning department are considered ministerial that we are not applying judgment to? If indeed the wording of the intent and purpose of ordinance 5.2A holds no legal bearing on the decisions of the zoning administrator or the decisions of the BZA, then why would the county lay out such an elaborate appeal procedure when there is no possibility that that appeal would be favorably viewed? Judgment should be a factor in these decisions. Although abutting neighbors are notified, and in this case, Even though 3 of the 5 abutting neighbors do not feel safe with this firearms business in a home next to theirs, they are in effect powerless to overturn this decision. We ask that you rescind the approval for this firearms related business in private homes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to, sorry, I'm going to close the public hearing one more time and ask Mr. Shepherd to continue, and I apologize profusely.
Actually, I appreciate the interruption because actually, Mr. Herrick stated more clearly than perhaps I was getting ready to talk about how our review is focused on 5.2A and all of the provisions in 5.2A, all of the home occupation provisions. And then starting with that, I would say, I believe that there are a couple of additional provisions in the home occupation regs that were not addressed with this. Well, and let me back up for one more thing. I think it would help us to understand that the clearance that was approved was for altering firearms, storage of firearms, and the provision of legal services. Right, the other things were taken, the transfer thing was removed from the approval of the clearance, I believe. Bart, would you just verify that before I go farther? For existing, altering existing firearms, secure storage of firearms, and legal services, including estates with firearms. That's what this approval was for, correct?
Those are the conditions stated in attachment D.
So that's what is approved with this clearance, right? So transfers is not included in this, right?
The approval letter does not include transfer.
Approval letter does not include transfers.
Right, that's the point. So, but there are a couple of other provisions that must be met with a home occupation. So in general, they must be goods that are handcrafted on site. And there are some other things to go along with that, but the word handcrafted shows up there. There was a memo issued in 2019 that says handcrafting requires that firearms be crafted from raw materials on site and not merely assembled on site. So I think for starters with this, to be able to demonstrate that the application is in compliance with 5.12A, that the use meets the definition that is permitted in a home occupation, which must be handcrafted, which is going on to say with that definition from the advisory memo, that it would have to be handcrafted from raw materials on site. There's no way for me to make a connection between what altering of guns is. I can make a lot of assumptions about that. I'm not a gun expert. I don't know. I can imagine things, but since it's not defined in the clearance, I think we're just left to assumptions and imagination with that. So I'm troubled with it, the staff report and the clearance itself does not tie that use to a section in 5.2. And also a requirement in 5.2A K, all home occupations must comply with performance standards set out in 4.14. I don't see where that was done. 5.14.5 A.4 Certified engineer's report requires other information to demonstrate the use will comply with this chapter and other requirements of the code and all state and federal laws. It goes on to set out specifically that a review by the engineering department would have to address flammable, hazardous, and explosive materials used in conjunction with the use that must comply with the requirements of the fire marshal and Department of Environmental Quality. So when I take all that together, I start with the idea that first, gun sales are permitted as a HOMOC in the rural areas, but with very specific restrictions that involve a definition of the activity and in accord with performance standards. And I'm not seeing where that has been done. So a ministerial act, in my opinion, is not just making sure that everything in an application has been submitted, but within a ministerial act, the analysis of the compliance with each and every component in the ordinance is met. So I see that gives me great pause here. Another thing, I don't see where storage is permitted in the rural areas. I mean, typically, you have self-storage and you have warehousing and heavy industrial and storage. Think, I have a storage unit. I don't like my storage unit. I have a storage unit. It's a great thing and it's in a commercial area. And warehousing, those are permitted in heavy industrial, in industrial areas and commercial areas. Some of those require special permits, some of those are by right, but they're not provided in the rural areas. I think my understanding of zoning would be that you could have storage that would be accessory to the primary use, the handcrafting activity that's happening with this home occupation, which would be like a potter. You could store clay. You could store inventory. You could store just things you would use in the course of making pottery. But storing other, guns from the public in the rural area, I do not see as what I think the zoning term is. That sort of storage is not customary and incidental to running a gunsmithing shop. So I'm not sure how I don't think that that's is available as a use in the rural areas. The legal services, I have no problem with, and I think that falls clearly within the sorts of things that are commonly approved in a home occupation. One more thing about, just on a personal note about the performance standards, to give you all sort of an idea how this works. I have a home occupation permit, sort of, at least I had it when I lived in Free Union for my dark room. I had a dark room. I made photographs. I sold some of them, not many, but that required a home occupation permit. And I had to go through a whole process when I applied for that to talk about how how the materials, the chemicals that I use in that process would be handled and disposed of. You have developer, those of you like pre-digital photography here, developer, stop, fixer, hypoclearing agent. That's what I used. You use that for a while, it wears out and you have to get rid of it. I was not permitted. There's a big review with that. I had to supply them with safety data sheets, go through this. I thought they were going overboard. There was a lot of conversation back and forth. The permit required me to not dump the chemicals out into my septic tank or on the ground. That was the kind of review I went through, was something which I would that was my personal experience. And I think that it sort of gives you an idea of the kind of back and forth you would expect with an application like this. So that's what I'm thinking.
Mr. Burkhart, what are you thinking?
A whole lot, a whole lot here. I'll share a story too. I feel, I'll get to the, what I think are some of the concerns that I have, but I need to caveat that with maybe a story like what Mr. Shepherd shared. Hearing the charge that we have from Mr. Herrick, Mr. Savoda, about what we as BZA members are charged, our responsibilities in looking at appeals when they come here, reminds me of a DUI case that I was called on a jury in San Diego. The person who was being charged with having blood in excess of a certain amount and charged with DUI never drank, never once drank. He was overweight though. His wife was a dietitian. He applied for the Los Angeles Fire Department, hoping to get into the academy, but he had to lose 60 pounds. So she put him on a very, very aggressive diet. He got ketosis. And as you know, that's a metabolism, your body metabolizes and alcohol comes out. Anyway, there was the celebration party. He had lost over 60 pounds. He's doing a barbecue. He drove over to the next city over to get his parents. Going back to his house, he got stopped at a normal stop along the way. And they asked him how he was doing. And he said, I'm doing great. He said, have you been drinking? He said, I haven't. He said, would you mind being tested? He said, absolutely not. And he blew into it. Next thing you know, he's handcuffed, he's charged. And so here we are in a jury trial, which was supposed to take an afternoon, it took 5 days. They flew in somebody from National Traffic Safety Administration to talk about the equipment that was used, the calibration of that equipment. We had real problems as jurors because we didn't feel this was right. He had absolutely no history from classmates, teachers, anybody about drinking. He didn't drink, but he blew over the blood alcohol limit. We had holdouts in that jury room, and we had to go back and forth several times with the judge to be reread the instructions of what our charge was on that day, or as jurors. We found him guilty, and it broke our hearts. And what the judge told us is that if you feel that strongly about it, and I think it probably was a flaw in the system, work with your legislators, go to Sacramento, get the law changed. And that was in the story. So I share that because there are some overriding things that give me discomfort today, things that I don't know about. And again, we're to look at the application and the process, and make our decisions accordingly. But when I really appreciated all the emails and communications that came forward from everyone who had opinions on both sides to be able to express this. But I'll go back to Mr. Shepherd when we talk about handcrafted. Are these locally procured materials? Someone in an email mentioned that it was possibility of 3D printer making these guns. I can tell you this, that if there's a generational business where somebody whose great-grandfather had handcrafted these firearms and they were highly sought after and they were limited edition and they were collector's items, that would be one thing where you had an heirloom firearm that would be produced and only maybe a certain number every year. And I guess that's one of the things that, I questioned, is that there was no indication the number of firearms to be produced in a calendar year. And I find also that the state law on cannabis, I mean, think of this, how many protections are written into Virginia State Code about the protection of kids and minors under the age of 18 and so on. And I'm hearing the concerns about the children. But then again, this is something that we cannot take into consideration because it is not part of the charge that we're faced with. These are some of the concerns. I do believe that greater security on things like this are warranted. And I'm speaking this because I see I have a member of the Board of Supervisors sitting back there. And I know that this issue is on their radar screen. So maybe they can incorporate some of this to where there are greater security measures that are in place, maybe a gated entrance, maybe bars on the window, whatever. But didn't hear anything in the narratives that came forward as far as what should have been or could have been. And the 5-day policy, the sending out of the notice where certified mail was sent out and you had 5 days to respond. We know about our mail system here. We know maybe some of you received the letters and did not have time. You certainly did, and recently because we heard from you. But I think that the good neighbor policy would have been, no, if I'm starting a business, I would have knocked on each of the adjoining doors and the person across the street and said, hey, I'm thinking about possibly doing a gun shop, and he would describe what that is. Do you have any concerns? If you do, let's talk about it. Because the email from the applicant, he was obviously surprised by the uproar that had occurred through the appeal by Ms. Maupin. So I think that that would have been helpful. So I want to hear from my other colleagues up here. There's one other thing. Does the ordinance allow for the discharge of firearms, and how would it apply to this? One of the last gentlemen to speak talked about the possibility of hearing gunshots and so on. I think when you take a look at this issue from the Board of Supervisors point of view, I think a lot of these concerns probably need to be put in here. But moving forward, taking our charge as we have to, and if the appeal is denied, I'm just wondering that in future rewrites of the county ordinance, whether the applicant on business license renewal would then have to follow the existing, or would that person be grandfathered in under what was approved at the time of the application? That's my question to you.
If the use is existing, and the ordinance changes, then it would be what we call a non-conforming use, turn to a non-conforming use, or it would not, it's unlikely that would be retroactive. We'd have to see how the ordinance would be written. But in most zoning law, when a use is pre-existing the adoption date of an ordinance, which includes a change of a regulation, then that business is allowed to stay, or that use is allowed to stay as is, can't expand. There's certain alteration limitations to it, but it's kind of trapped in time for whatever its approval is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anything else, Mr. Burkhardt?
For now, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Carrington.
I don't have any good stories for you guys today. But I do appreciate the community's involvement. I'm thankful to see everyone here, and I think this is encouraging to this board to see so many faces. Just be quick. I mean, I think there's a misunderstanding of this board's role and authority. And I have yet to hear anything to suggest that the board or rather that staff did anything except handle this by the book. I think they applied the appropriate, they applied the relevant ordinances appropriately in this case. And this board, I think, is charged with reviewing that and seeing if there's a flaw in that process. And for the process that is laid out, whether we like it or not, for the process that is laid out, I think the staff did an exemplary job in this case.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, I guess we're going to have to agree to disagree on that aspect of, when I read just this little paragraph that announces what was approved, it's just so nebulous in my mind. When somebody says that they can alter an existing firearm, I don't know what that means. It's not at all connected with what the ordinance requires, and that would be manufacturing something homespun. It doesn't mean, I mean, altering, when I first read this, I thought, good Lord, I watched too many cop shows. What are they doing with these guns? How are they being altered? There's no specificity to this that if you got any sort of concern from the neighbors, that you could go and say, wait a minute, guy, you're not doing what you said you were going to do. The email that we received from the gun person, what's his name, Mr. Wayner. I mean, it was more specific than any of the information that we've received as far as what he was planning on doing. The other thing, I don't see anything in home occupation that would allow for him to store other people's guns. And whether it's connected with his law practice or whether it's connected with someone from the military who would like a place to store guns, it doesn't seem as if it's something that was contemplated when the home occupation ordinance was created and allowed for anything to do with guns. There's sort of a specific in there that, yes, if someone within the family is creating a gun, making a gun, then that's something that can occur. But this altering, allowing the alteration, and also storing, secure store. What does secure storing mean? Is there anything specific that is written in here that would, because again, I know, but what we're all supposed to be doing, what county staff does is health, safety, and welfare. And I think that when you look at the ordinance and there's such wiggle room in this approval, I don't think it follows the ordinance requirements. So, and I do respect you guys. I know what you do. I know you do. You work hard and you do a good job, but I just don't agree with you on this particular approval.
Would you like me to address any of that?
If you feel you'd like to, yeah, please.
Okay, so alterations, when we talk about a gunsmith, is the same as sort of a tailor, right? So an alteration could be replacing a trigger, engraving, things like that. That's
Okay. But what are you altering? Are you making this thing? Do you have a drill press? Do you have a metal lathe? Do you have, and if you do, what are you doing with the materials that are left over? Is there oil involved? Are there other chemicals involved within this process? What are you doing with those? I mean, it's so loose in the way it's defined. I don't know. And you're not going to be here forever. And Jeff Baker's not going to be here forever. So if something comes up, there's going to be nothing written down that is going to allow anybody in the future to know why and what was approved. That's kind of where I've been around a long time. And I know that some of this stuff is really necessary because staff moves on from time to time. And I just think it's necessary for us to make sure that even so they're saying alteration, but there's no connection with how this alteration connects with what is allowed in a home occupation. You're talking tailor. Nobody cares if the tailor's got a whole bunch of spools of thread or piles of fabric. Guns are spelled out as a home occupation, spelled out very specifically in what can happen in that home. And this just says alteration. That's all it says. There's no connection with any of the requirements in the ordinance.
yes, similarly to how we review other home occupations, and I know gun is a hot button issue, right? Is that we don't make the baker tell me what the mixer is, what they're doing with their oil. And I realize that this is a different sensitivity for people. It is not a different sensitivity for the ordinance. And so the intent or the protection that's involved in the ordinance is built into those regulations and those standards. When we look at regular setbacks about houses, whether I have 50 people in there or 20 people in there, that regulation is specific and it talks about that, doesn't talk about if there's a use that requires a supplemental reg, then there may be an increase in that, right?
Please.
I would like to respond to that. If I remember correctly, in the past, many uses that had to go in front of the planning commission or the board of supervisors were a change was made where staff was given more responsibility to review applications like this. The idea was that the board of supervisors trusted the staff to follow the regulations closely and exactly and do the reviews. It sounds like you do have to know what the baker is doing. You have to, because the baker is using products that must conform with performance standards. So you can't just let the baker, you have to know what he's doing and make conditions that constrain what he's doing and have his processes reviewed by engineering and perhaps the health department, whoever would have, whatever agency or law would have jurisdiction over that. And I think that I just am having trouble just thinking about not considering the performance standards in this review. I don't see how that could have possibly happened. Not to mention, there's not a very tight connection between the words on the page about altering and alterations and how that cleanly fits in, as they say, the four corners of the page in the HOMOC section that requires that things be handcrafted that were handcrafted on site, and how that comports with the advisory opinion that you wrote in 2019 that says handcrafted means using raw materials. Does a tailor use raw materials? Do you start with wool cut off of a goat, or do you start with fabric? Is a raw material produced from the site? I mean, it's not clear. To approve something like this, I think it is essential, I'm going to turn this way, that is essential that all the criteria in the 5.2a has to be satisfied, just right down the line. You can't, they're talking about, it meets parking, transportation, it meets certain things. It's got to meet everything, I think. And that's where I'm putting it out there in the way that I am.
Yes, if we go back to the performance standards, 4.14.5A4, it talks about other information, and it says any state or federal permits, readings, measurements, plans, documentation necessary to demonstrate that the proposed use will comply with this chapter. So, I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is that in the staff report itself, it says, well, we can't do anything about ATF, but it's a federal approval that's necessary as far as the certified engineers report. And the certified engineers report just, it can be from an engineer, but it also can be from the county engineer. It can be a letter from an applicant.
That's what mine was.
Okay, who writes it to the county engineer explaining what's going on. So you don't have to have that extra expense in going to an engineer, but it can be something that the applicant themselves can submit with the information that the county engineer feels is appropriate and necessary. So I'm just feeling very uncomfortable because there's a lot of information that's missing here that makes me not able to, what did you ask? To affirm the administrative determination. But Carrington.
I would be interested in hearing my fellow board members' opinion on enforcement, because I think that's relevant to a lot of these issues. And I think the question of how enforcement downstream occurs and whether it occurs pertains to a lot of what we're talking about, whether enforcement downstream happens to all of these conditions. And I think that if a performance standard was being violated downstream, that all of a sudden this application and this home occupation permit would be revoked or you'd be in violation. Is that correct? If you're operating a home occupation and you are not in compliance with the performance standards, your home occupation permit would then be removed or taken away or suspended or something, correct?
Ultimately, that's the possibility. So there's a violation procedure that includes measures to come into compliance, fines, court appearances, and ultimately revocation or injunction, depending on the process, if willful non-compliance is determined.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I think the problem here is there are no performance standards being proposed for this. So there'd be nothing to enforce.
Well, I think they have to comply with all the performance standards in section 4.14 as part of
Have to
the
be,
permit.
they have to be specific. That's, I think, the real crux of the problem. This is becoming almost sort of philosophical, like what is the responsibility in a ministerial review? Is it it's not a checklist. When it says you have to, the performance standards are required, that means you don't go back to that later. There's nothing to enforce. It happens now where this, as I say, like with my little dark room, it wasn't like they weren't going to come back. Somebody wasn't going to complain about what I was doing with my chemicals, and they were going to tell me, oh, well, we've got to check what you do with your chemicals. That was established as part of my getting the clearance. And that's where I had to submit information about all the chemicals. And they reviewed that. This was a big discussion, because when I worked at the county, when they were going to review my thing, they really were thorough about it. And I knew how to deal with that. And the result was I have specific conditions on my clearance, and they're not here. See, that's the thing there. You can't go back and enforce it later if it's not specific. They can only enforce what's on the approval letter.
You want this? Yeah.
That makes sense.
Do you need that?
No, it starts the.
Okay, yeah. You wanna go? I guess, Mr. Shepherd, this is our job, is to suss this out, and I guess all we have is the specificity that's included in the application, and maybe arcing to one that is specific. I mean, if Mr. Weiner thinks that fewer than 10 cars will come per day or 30 per week, if 31 cars come, then all of a sudden this home occupation permit is not being complied with, correct?
I think that's incorrect. I think once it's.
We can't hear you, Mr. Shepherd.
I think it's incorrect that actually when, once it's approved and there aren't other conditions applied to it, then you couldn't enforce those. And also, I think it's what Mr. Herrick was saying earlier. It's important to make the distinction between those sort of the preamble part of the home occupations that talk about the general effect of home occupations generally in a district and their effects, should be addressed in a very closely in a matter of a rezoning. A text amendment when you're talking about the general policy throughout the district. You're thinking about character of the neighborhood, traffic and that sort of thing. But with a specific case, I don't think you can't go back and issue a violation because there's too much traffic caused, right? And because there's not a definite limit on it. Well, but with traffic, if there's a number there, yes, but the performance standards are not specific. I mean, in fact, I want to make that distinction. If there's a definite number of visits, that can be enforced.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, that can be enforced, but with the performance standards, like how do you, like, will there be explosives on the property? And if so, how will they be stored? How will that be handled safely? And that's my problem. That's not in there. And I think that's what we're really talking about. And you can't go in later and say, there's a violation of a potential issue when it's
But I
not
think-
specific.
I think that's maybe where we're missing each other, is that I think that the county does have the means to go in and the authority to go enforce the performance standards or the traffic limits or any of the other provisions. Is that incorrect? Okay.
It's,
Just let it go at that.
well, if there were performance standards, yes. How does, I guess the thing is, how does there's no limit to how many alterations can happen. There's no distinction of what these alterations are. There's no detail concerning secure storage of firearms. There's no detail involved in any of this. So what are they gonna go in and look at? I mean, it's just, if someone comes in and complains, the inspector can say, well, they're altering existing firearms. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It doesn't matter that this isn't homespun. It doesn't matter, because that's what they were approved for, the end. I mean, they can buy bits and pieces off the internet. They can, I don't know, someone mentioned in one of their, I think you mentioned it too, is the 3D printer thing. There's nothing in here that says anything about any kind of connection with what the ordinance allows.
I think what we're dealing with here is an antiquated code. I think what's been handed to us is a process that start to finish to where we are today, worked its way through, as imperfect as I think we all feel that it is. I think it's incumbent on the county board of supervisors to take a close look and create and put some definitions, put some metrics, put something behind this where it's very, very clear for the next applicant coming forward. But I think we agree that this is highly imperfect. But it's what we're dealing with.
Mr. Shepherd, I wanted to circle back to something you said, which is that this home occupation has to comply with not just some of them, but all of them. And I certainly agree with that. And I guess that's maybe another thing that I'd love to talk about is I can't find one that is that this application, this specific application is violating. And the lack of specificity, I agree with you. But I haven't found any that are being violated. And so if you can point me to that or help me understand that, that would be great.
Okay, so. Second. Okay, all home occupancies must comply with performance standards. And it goes on from there. I've got like consolidated notes here. So a certified engineer's report requires other information to demonstrate that the use will comply with this chapter. That has not been supplied. There is no other information supplied.
Mr.
that
Mr. Shepherd,
misuse-
will you tell everybody what your source is when you talk words in an order?
Okay, I'm quoting from the ordinance, and this is 4.14.5 A.4. That a certified engineer's report requires other information to demonstrate that the use will comply with this chapter, other requirements of the code, and all state and federal laws. I haven't seen where any of this information was supplied, analyzed, and incorporated into the conditions of this request. Specifically, if there's anything involving flammable, hazardous, or explosive materials used in conjunction with the use must comply with requirements of the fire marshal and the DEQ. Was the fire marshal asked to comment on this? Is there?
Ms. Shepherd, if I might address some of your concerns about performance standards. Yes, I agree that the performance standards do apply, but it's a finite list of performance standards. It's not whatever the zoning administrator feels. It's the performance standards that are listed in 4.14. And those are noise, vibration, glare and heat, electrical disturbance. And then, as you've indicated, there's the provision in 4.14.5 that deals with certified engineers report. You're focusing on, if I might, you're focusing on subsection 8.4, but if you go to the very top of that section, it limits everything that follows. It says, prior to the issuance of a zoning clearance or approval of a final site plan, each prospective occupant of a use of an industrial character shall submit a certified engineer's report as follows. And then it goes from there. So the 4.14 provisions are limited to uses of an industrial character. So a certified engineer's report is not required for every use, just the uses of an industrial character. That's all that 4.14.5 applies to. And if I might address Mr. Carrington's repeated questions about the enforceability of the home occupation regs post-clearance, let me clarify a little bit what a zoning clearance is. Basically, it's when an applicant comes in, provides a proposal, and the zoning official takes a look at it and says, basically, if you comply, here's your business plan. If you follow your business plan, you will be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. However, if the applicant either fails to comply with what I'm going to call the business plan, or if the applicant fails to comply with section 5.2.8, the zoning administrator has the ability to go out and enforce the provisions of 5.2.8 post-clearance. Again, the clearance is just sort of a pre-clearance, if you will, to say basically, if you comply with the plan that you've submitted, we find that that will be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. So I hope I've addressed your questions.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion? I guess if not, I guess it's time to,
Repeating myself.
I think that's what we're all doing here. But as staff has given us, there are 3 avenues that could be followed. One is to affirm the administrative determination. 2 is to modify administration determination with specific modifications. Or 3, to reverse the administrative determination. Do we have anyone who would like to address any one of those 3 choices? We have a motion.
I might put something before my colleagues is, I guess we just heard about a definition of industrial character, and I don't know what that definition is off the top of my head, but certainly from what I've read, I don't think that the applicant would oppose the inclusion of some sort of restriction on industrial activities. I wonder if something like that starts to provide a little bit more specificity.
That's
I
where
think
I
we're
think
pre-
you're going astray, and I don't think that that's within your proper function here today in considering this appeal. That's where I think you're going astray, and I don't think that's within a proper function of your considerations in addressing this appeal today, to get into establishing new conditions or new restrictions, what have you. That's really the job of the zoning administrator in this particular case. That's considering also where this appeal is coming from. Appeal of the zoning determination.
Mr. Boyd, do you have any guidance on the board's concern about lack of specificity?
I think that you have to address the issue that's before you, and you've had the expressions one way or the other as to whether or not the zoning administrator has considered all of the requirements of zoning ordinance section 5.2.a, which also include in section 5.2.k performance standards, which are all home occupations shall comply with the performance standards in section 4.14. Then you go to section 4.14 and you find out that there's a word of art used for industrial concerns. So there you are. I mean, it is a quasi judicial determination what you've got before you. It's not 100% perfectly clear factual determination in this particular case. The ordinance, as Mr. Burkhart said, is in this particular circumstance is archaic.
All right, thank you.
Anyone like to propose a motion?
I'll take a crack at it.
Okay.
The last meeting, we talked about having the motion be live streamed. Are we doing that? Hope we're doing that. These motions can get very confusing. If we have it on the screen and see what we're really talking about, it'll be very helpful.
Are you typing it?
Trying to get it up now. Hang.
Go to your slide.
So I make a motion that we reverse the zoning administrator's determination on the basis of 5.2 AD.1 and 5.2 AL6 that both refer to the definition of handcrafted, that refer to the requirement that the manufacturing activities be handcrafted. In addition to that, the lack of the completion of the certified engineer's report that is required in 5.2 AK, and that it meets the requirements of 4.14. And I would also reference in my thinking about this 4.14.5A4 that this report and requirement required additional information to demonstrate the use will comply with the zoning ordinance. And 4.14.5.4D that references the review of flammable, hazardous, and explosive materials. And lastly, that the storage is not a permitted use in the rural areas. Kind of ponderous, but I don't know how else to do it.
Do we have any further discussion on that?
Let me just say, because
That's the end of the motion. We need a second before any discussion occurs.
Do we have a second? I second. Okay, now, do we have any discussion on this preponderance of information that Mr. Shepherd suggested?
and this is, I think just for this, I imagine it's hard to find and sort of perplexing as to what we're doing right here. But because this is a quasi judicial proceeding, it's necessary, which can possibly be appealed to circuit court. It is necessary for us to both render a decision and also provide the basis for the decision, which is tied, directly to particular provisions of the ordinance. And that's why I'm reading all these code sections, and that's the purpose of that. And that's what we're going to be talking about now. Things can be added and subtracted from that motion, and we'll come to a conclusion.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. Ms. Alley, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Burkhart,
No.
Mr. Rosenberg, oh, he's not here, I'm sorry. Mr. Carrington,
No.
Mr. Shepherd,
Yes.
Ms. Joseph,
Yes. Okay, that vote failed. Do we have another motion on the floor?
Go to it, Mr. Carrington.
All right, I'll make a motion after hearing and considering all the evidence and arguments and for the reasons stated in the staff report, that this BZA affirm the administrative determination for zoning clearance HO 2023-00-002.
There a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on this motion? Ms. Alley, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Burkhart,
Yes.
Mr. Carrington,
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd,
No.
Joseph,
No. Okay,
Tied.
if we're tied, that means that the decision stays.
That's how I understand it.
Yeah. So hang on just a second. What it means is that with a tie for both of these votes is that the decision of the zoning administrator stays. If you do not like that, what you can do is appeal this decision from this board to the circuit court. That's the next step in the appeal process. And I think I would also second what Mr. Burkhart has been pleading with you to do, is talk to your board members. Tell them what your concerns are. I know it took a lot of your time to work on this, because I know it's just not the 2 hours you were sitting here. I know you've been working on this for a while. So keep moving forward if that's how you feel. And thank you for showing up. And I think, because my watch told me to stand up an hour ago, we're going to recess for 10 minutes. He didn't win.
Well, about that.
You.
Yeah, right. I should have not shut up.
Hang on.
And
There we go.
we good?
Yeah, I just let them know that we were reconvening and your mic was still muted, so it just came back on.
Oh, okay,
It was a lag.
okay. Since I just lagged, I'll try to speed it up. Okay, the next item on our agenda is another appeal. And it's AP 2023-00002. And it's an appeal of a determination of a homestay request. And we would ask, please, Mr. Svoboda, if you would, or I don't know which one of you, Mr. Herrick, whichever one of you will propose the staff report, please let us know.
Okay, that would be me. I'll
Okay,
start
thank
off.
you.
Mr. Herrick may have some comments to add. I'll try and keep it brief. Thank you, Chair Joseph. This is so we'll start similar to the last presentation. This is a location map of the property. You can see that the actual small house located on there is for the proposed home occupation. And the house that kind of has the yellow running through it, which is kind of to the southwest, is the primary dwelling. This is just another map showing the zoning districts, and you can see where the zoning runs along that county line. The white represents the A1 in Albemarle County, or sorry, rural area in Albemarle County. The size of the parcel itself is about 24.2 acres. Is located at 9473 Dick Woods Road. So we covered this in the last presentation, the powers and duties. One of the things that's a little bit different, this particular application, is we're going to talk about where the ordinance applies, and it applies within the jurisdictional limits of Albemarle, not outside. Again, we're here to determine whether or not the zoning administrator's decision was correct and whether or not the zoning ordinance was applied correctly, not whether or not the use is appropriate, whether or not the use is noxious, or whether or not it could be regulated by Albemarle regulations as far as the home occupation goes, just the home occupation use. It'll make a little more sense as I run through it. So on February 8th of 2023, an official notice of violation was sent. That was attachment C. On February 17th, February 17th through March 7th, a series of conversations regarding the requirement that a primary use be located within the jurisdiction of Albemarle County to permit an accessory use took place on March 2nd. The official determination was issued by our senior planner, Ms. Brumfeld, which determined that the cabin was not eligible to operate as a homestay because the primary dwelling was located in Nelson County. So as I explained that, what we would have needed to determine is that a structure not located in the county came under the jurisdiction of zoning, and we were able to call it a primary use. Because a homestay is a accessory use, it's not a primary use. On March 29th, the appeal was filed, and the appeal was filed appropriately. The zoning official based her determination on the fact that no primary use existed within Albemarle County's jurisdiction, and the cabin did not qualify as accessory use for a homestay. This is not an uncommon determination that we have to make even within zoning districts. If I have a zoning district that's zoned RA and it's next to a district that's zoned commercial, the commercial parking lots not allowed in the RA district as an example of how that zoning line is pretty tight. A couple of facts that we don't dispute is that the use is accessory under the county ordinance, that the primary dwelling is located in Nelson County. Those two specifically, the Albemarle County zoning ordinance applies only within Albemarle County, not outside. And the zoning ordinance covers only those uses that take place within the county, not in other jurisdictions. So the zoning administrator has no authority to reach over the line and declare uses that take place in other jurisdictions. Code of Virginia 15.22281, jurisdiction of localities. I'm going to read that quickly, which is for the purposes of zoning, the governing body of a county shall have jurisdiction over all the unincorporated territory in the county, not outside of the county. So again, the zoning administrator cannot reach out beyond the county line to determine uses. Based on this, the zoning administrator and zoning officials' determination was and is correct, and the Board of Zoning Appeals should affirm that determination.
Thank you. Okay. And next, we would ask the appellant if they'd like to present anything. And Mr. Blaine, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm here representing the appellants, Dr. and Mrs. Harwood. Dr. Harwood could not be here today. He's in surgery, but Mrs. Harwood has a brief statement that she'd like to give now, and then I can provide our arguments in the case.
Thank you.
Thank you for your willingness to hear our appeal today. Today's decision affects us obviously more than any other party. So I just want to introduce you to our family and our property. My husband and I have 6 children, and our family's history and the properties intersected when we moved to the area in 2021. My husband is an orthopedic surgeon in the United States Navy Reserve, and I am a stay-at-home mom and homeschool my kids. As a naval officer, my husband was back to be in Virginia, as was I, having grown up in DC, but I always loved Virginia countryside. The property's name is Clonmel, which is an Irish word for honey meadows. The cabin at Clonmel was built in the late 1700s and was in relative disrepair when we arrived. We decided to make the cabin's restoration a priority so that it could be there for another 300 years. The restoration took over a year, involved architects, engineers, and more than 20 artisans from seven different local companies. The restoration even included elevation of the entire cabin and building and a foundation, putting a new foundation underneath. It is also now solar powered. The cabin is a blessing, and with all our blessings, our biggest obligation is to share it with as many people as possible. 2 months into our homestay, we received notice from Albemarle County of our noncompliance. While we worked to rectify our noncompliance as quickly as possible, we were then notified by the zoning division of their determination that because of the unique characteristics of our property, we were not eligible to apply for a homestay. Needless to say, it took the wind out of our sails. We believe that the argument raised by our legal counsel, Mr. Blaine, as they relate to the policy and interpretive issues at play, provide a compelling appeal. Furthermore, I would add that the entire 34 acres is a conservation easement and indivisible. It has been appraised as a single property, and we purchased it as a single property. We pay one mortgage. We are appealing for the opportunity to comply. We are appealing to share the blessings of our lovingly restored historic cabin at Clonmel. We hope to bless as many people as possible with the rich history and beauty of Albemarle County that we all love and hold dear. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So as we know, the Harwoods are appealing the zoning administrator's determination regarding this proposed homestay. The issue here is whether the Harwoods can maintain a homestay for the cabin, which is located in Albemarle County, when the primary dwelling or the main house is located on the same parcel of land, but in Nelson County. The zoning administrator had to infer from the ordinance that the main house must also be located in Albemarle County, for this homestay to be qualified. The inference, we believe, is not necessary to protect the health and safety and welfare of the county. And it's not consistent with the plain reading of the ordinance. That's the basis for our appeal. We don't believe I don't think there are any disputed facts in this, which is kind of unique. It's approximately 34 acres. I think Mr. Swoboda might have said 24, but it's 34 acres. And it's a single parcel. As Ms. Harwood mentioned, it's subject to a conservation easement, which requires that will always be a single parcel, cannot be divided or separately owned. I think the slide that Mr. Swoboda showed also indicates that the cabin would meet all the required parcel conditions, setbacks, so forth, under the homestay ordinance. So, but for this issue regarding the location of the primary dwelling, the cabin would meet all the other parcel related and qualifications for a homestay. The homestay ordinance requires as a condition that if the short-term rental is located in an accessory building, there must be a primary dwelling located on the same parcel. Nowhere in the ordinance does it require that the main house, the primary use, be located in the county. These are the facts that we have before us. A primary residence or main house is located on the same parcel of land as the homestay cabin. Now, the ordinance doesn't really say the same parcel, but I think we can take notice that that's how the ordinance has been interpreted, and we don't have any reason to quarrel with that interpretation. But that's part of what makes it an accessory use, is it's located on the same parcel. Now, I certainly understand the county's position and the experience we've had, I think, kind of growing up in this practice. We start with Euclid versus Ambler. We know that if a use is not specifically spelled out in an ordinance, it's not permitted. Except we've evolved to this concept of if the primary use is permitted, then what we call accessory uses, which are subordinate or accessory to the primary use, are permitted. Those accessory uses are permitted because of this interpretation. Now, for example, swimming pools and garages are not specifically identified in the ordinances as permitted uses in the rural areas, but we all know those are customary and subordinate to a residential use, and that's why they're permitted. But in 2019, the Board of Supervisors came along and adopted a specific ordinance that deals with the homestay use. So the 2019 ordinance that we're interpreting actually creates a use that's permitted in, I think, all the zoning districts within the county. And it sets forth its own regulations and rules for that use. Now, one of those rules we acknowledge is that if it's in a separate building, that building needs to be accessory to the primary use. Our reading of that ordinance means that that's a condition. That doesn't mean that you have to have the primary use located within the same jurisdiction. I tried to think of some other examples that would be analogous. I mean, the county regulates the resource protection areas or stream beds. And certainly if you had a structure located in Albemarle County and there was a stream located in Nelson County, the thing that's being regulated is the building, not the stream, but the stream still exists. And the interpretation that we have in this determination is that because this primary dwelling, which we know exists, it's a fact, because it is in Nelson County, the zoning administrator is taking the position that it doesn't exist, which simply rejects reality. trying to think of another example, but boundary lines, if there's a boundary line located in Nelson County, could we not enforce the setbacks in Albemarle County? I don't think so. It's not necessary for the county to have jurisdiction over the primary dwelling to enforce and regulate this use. The fact that we're here today and that there was a notice of violation demonstrates that the county is certainly able to exert jurisdiction over what's intended to be regulated. It's the homestay use. And if the county can take the interpretation to deny the permit, they should be able to have the jurisdiction to issue the permit. The other reasons why it wouldn't be necessary to have jurisdiction, I think it kind of goes back to what we heard in that last hearing about, well, we have these standards and we have these rules. How do we make sure that we can enforce them downstream? Well, you have them in the ordinance that pertains to the homestay use. So the fact that the primary dwelling is located in Nelson County doesn't mean the owners still must provide verification of their residency. They still have to provide an annual notice to abutting landowners. If the use in Nelson County that supports this homestay use changes, Nelson County allows hotels in this zoning district. Then through the homestay ordinance, the permit or whatever the permission could be rescinded because the supporting condition no longer exists. So there's a subtle difference because it's not in our common understanding of primary uses and accessory uses to stay in line with our Euclid versus Ambler. This is a condition that just requires that there be a primary residence when you have a homestay in a separate building, an accessory use, and we have those facts in this case. So why did the Board of Supervisors, impose this requirement, the homestay be located on the same parcel? They didn't really have to uphold the traditional primary versus accessory for a permitted use. They did it because it provides a baked-in way to monitor, govern the uses going on in the parcel. There's less likelihood of disruptive behavior at a homestay, an Airbnb, if you have the owner and the primary resident next door, and in this case, 200 feet away. So we believe our interpretation is more in keeping with the purposes of the homestay ordinance, and that the health, safety, and welfare of the county can be upheld by qualifying this cabin for a homestay use. I'm going to stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Blink?
I do, and I do. It's in a series of emails, and I have to say the Harwoods just jumped on this lickety split. There was no delay of time. You guys were going back and forth trying to find that amenable solution to something that maybe you weren't aware of when you purchased the property. But what I found very interesting was the email on Tuesday, February 28th, from your husband, Jared, to Keith Bradshaw. And you say, "Dear Albemarle County Code Compliance Team, I wanted to update you on some additional information we received from our solar project contractor regarding building permits they had to obtain when installing the solar panels for the cabin. They were advised by," and this is the key, "Albemarle County that in regard to the building permits since the majority of the property was in Nelson County, that it was considered a Nelson County property and that they needed to obtain the building permits from Nelson County, which they did. Now you have a structure in Albemarle County. You indicated you had Tiger Solar, I believe that was going to be contracted to do the work. And you had other vendors that were out there doing work as well. I want to know who in Albemarle County advised you to basically deal with Nelson, even though it was a shared jurisdictional issue.
You need
Excuse
to
me,
come
ma'am,
to
could
the
you come
mic.
to the mic?
I wish I could answer that question for you very clearly, and unfortunately I cannot because my husband was the one that was doing the back and forth for the solar permits and I guess the solar team as well. But that was just, so I can't give you a name of who told them that was the answer for finding the permits.
And what was Nelson County's response when you folks approached them and said, well, this is what Albemarle told us to do?
And they went ahead and said, great, you have a permit. There was no pushback on their end.
So Nelson County issues and approves a permit that you folks will then post or have somewhere in Albemarle County for work done on your property.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think that's a good question. It demonstrates the confusion that can arise from the various that's a completely different area of regulation, but it prompts, Nelson County allows Airbnbs as well. So which is the jurisdiction that applies? So if Nelson County's allows a Airbnb and an accessory use, and Albemarle County denies the permit, then what's to keep Nelson County from granting the permit? My position is that it's the use that's being regulated. It goes back to my examples of the stream beds. I believe Albemarle has jurisdiction on the cabin and should have jurisdiction on the homestay use. But that doesn't mean that it has to have jurisdiction over the primary use, because that's a fact. That's a factual condition. It's not a use because Albemarle said it so. It's not a use because Nelson said it so. It's what the use is.
Anything else?
So, thank you.
You're good? Thank you. Okay, now we do have members of the public that would like to speak. So Ms. Alley, could you read those? No. Oh, sure, if you'd like to read it. Absolutely.
Brent Gunsalis. You can correct me on that. I'm sorry for the butchering of your name.
Well, you must tell this young
What it
man-
rhymes with.
No.
And I don't have a rhyme for it. But
You-
anyway, thank you very much.
You've got 3 minutes. That's all.
Excuse me just a moment. I think you were referring to me reading the guidelines.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, hang on. So let's make sure we get that done too.
Sorry.
Hang on just a
It'll
second.
just be a moment and we're not going to dock you for your time. How
Okay.
about that? Public comment is welcome during public hearings. If you wish to comment on those matters for which public comment is scheduled, please list your name on the appropriate sign-up sheet. When your name is announced for comment, please come to the microphone and state your name for the record. For uncommon spellings, please spell your name for the recording clerk. If you are representing a group of people, you may want to have a spokesperson present, to present your position to the board. In order to give all speakers equal treatment and courtesy, the board requests that speakers adhere to the following guidelines. Come forward to the speaker's podium and state your name. Address comments directly to the board as a whole. Open public debate is prohibited. State your position and give facts and other data to back it up. Keep in mind there is a 3-minute time limit for public comment. Provide written statements or other supporting material to the recording clerk, and written comments are also welcome if you do not wish to speak.
All right.
All right. My name is Brent Gonzalez, and I occupy the property adjacent to the land where the cabin is located that the Harwoods would like to use for an Airbnb. We've lived there for about 27 years now. And I had a prepared statement, but two things I wanted to mention. One is that the Harwoods live in Michigan now. They don't live in the main house in Nelson County. And secondly, just to clear up any misunderstanding, I believe that the solar panels that they had installed are also in Nelson County. I haven't had it surveyed, but they moved them pretty far away from the cabin over sort of near the main house. So I think those facts may be relevant. I also want to say that Dr. Harwood and his family are lovely, lovely people. Allison and their children, they're all great. I had mentioned some concerns I had about the fact that they put a fire pit in right next to the property, actually a little closer to our house than the cabin is, that our bedroom, my home office, and our screen porch all overlook this fire pit, which I think invites, late nights and being outside later in cold weather than would normally be the case. And it's only about 95 feet, I think, from our property. They put a little woodshed between the pit and our property, but it's not enough to really screen. So I don't think it's effectively screened. I don't think the owners are physically present on the property. And those are also concerns. I mentioned to Jared on a couple of occasions some of our concerns, particularly about the fire pit. And he said, as Allison did, that they really want to open this beautiful place up to as many people as possible. But I note that while they aren't on the premises and even the main house is pretty far away, we are right there, and it's going to interfere, I think, with our ability to enjoy our house because of possible late nights. We don't think that the Harwoods would use it this way, but they don't have any control over who is going to rent the cabin, and it could be, it's as likely to be a UVA reunion party or something like that as it is to be another sweet family like the Harwoods. So I believe that section 5.1.48 D3(1) asks the board to consider that whether it would have an adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood. And I think that particularly because of the unscreened fire pit, it would have an adverse effect. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Alan Lane.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Alan Lane. My wife and I live just to the west of the Gonzaleses. So we're like just the Harwoods and the Gonzaleses than us. And we have lots of Airbnbs in the neighborhood already. And if this jurisdictional thing between Nelson and Albemarle County is any way to lessen some of that, I would be very happy. I can't cite any kind of code things or anything like that. But just the noise and the change of the character of the neighborhood is not good. It's detrimental, I think. And that's about all I have to say. And I support what Mr. Gonzalez said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlene Corner.
Hello, my name is Charles Coiner. I own property that borders the Harwoods properties, all of my properties in Nelson County. I just don't believe that this would be a problem to me or I don't know, other neighbors have to speak for themselves, but it would not be a problem to me, and we look forward to having people stay in that old log cabin.
Thank you.
Brenda Saunders.
Hello, I'm Brenda Saunders. My property borders their property, and I have the same problem they have. Part of it's in Nelson, part of it's in Albemarle. And to your response or question to her, I'm all the time getting from Nelson County, oh, well, you need to talk to Albemarle, or Albemarle saying, no, we don't want to fool with that, go to Nelson. So, it's one of those things when you border two counties. But that cabin has been rented out all these years. The only change to it is that they upgraded, made it really nice. The main house
although it's in Nelson, is only 200 feet from the front door of the cabin in Albemarle. So I don't know what you all can do about that because it borders the two counties. But I don't see a problem with it. There's somebody there at all times in the main house. And there's also Mr. Coiner and myself, who, if they're on vacation or whatever, we go and take care of the place for the Harwoods. It's just called being neighborly. But I've never heard any loud noises down there. I have two wineries that back up to my property, and I'm all the time down there yelling at them to turn their music down. I've never been to the Harwoods asking them to keep their occupants quiet. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this item? No, I think we do.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Lynn Gonzalez, Frank Gonzalez's wife. I just echo what he said. And also the fact that they have not yet been operating the cabin as an Airbnb. So there haven't been a lot of different groups there. So we don't know what the potential noise level, might be. So I am very concerned about the fire pit. We had asked if they could move it over to, the other side of the cabin to at least give us our privacy back. But that hasn't happened. And just to bring a little levity here, I did notice a sign out front that said it's Older Americans Month. And this older American just wants to get some sleep. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, she didn't do 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, Brenda Saunders, real
No.
quick. You're not supposed to do that.
Okay, sorry.
Oh,
Sorry. Ms. Alley tells us. Thank you, Ms. Alley.
because I don't have a record of what was remaining, so.
Right. Okay, now is rebuttal time. Mr. Herrick?
Madam Chair, members of the board, again, Andy Herrick, I'm the Deputy County Attorney. And the reason that this is before the board today is because of County Code Section 18-5.1.48B1, which provides each homestay use must be accessory to a primary residential use. That's the basis, is that every homestay use must have a primary residential use associated with this. In this case, this cabin is the only structure in Albemarle County. The zoning administrator doesn't have any jurisdiction over structures that may lie outside of the county. It's been the county's consistent administrative practice to treat and consider only the dwellings, structures, and uses that are in the county. Most of the time, this interpretation practice works in the favor of property owners. I'll give you an example. There was a situation where there was a lot that straddled the city and county line on which a dwelling had already been constructed on the county side. And the question was, could this owner also build a dwelling on the city side? And the answer is the county's zoning jurisdiction only extends to Albemarle County. So whatever uses might occur on the city side of that, county would have no jurisdiction to stop. And so in the case of this property that I'm talking about that straddled the city county line, it worked to the benefit of the owner in that they were essentially getting two lots for the price of one, that they had the ability to have dwellings on both sides. Again, that's just consistent with what the administrative practice has been in the county. Unfortunately for the owners in this case, that practice works against the owners in this case, but it has been the consistent administrative practice that we focus exclusively on what is on the county side. In this case, the Albemarle County side. And in this case, there is no primary residential use in Albemarle County that the zoning administrator has jurisdiction over. And so that's the reason why we believe that the administrative determination was correct and would ask that you uphold it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blaine?
All I can agree with Mr. Herrick is that his interpretation would be to the detriment of my client. The ordinary instance where in those cases that he cites as instances, I would take the same opinion. But here we have a specific ordinance that if it was in the intent of the Board of Supervisors, it would have said that the primary use had to be within either the same zoning district or the locality. Here, we, as a factual matter, we have a homestay use that is accessory to a primary residential use. You can go out there and see the primary residential use. It's on the same parcel of land. It may not be accessory to an accessory apartment. Well, we don't have that case here. There was a mention about where the Harwoods live. They are currently residing in Minnesota, not Michigan. But they understand that there must be an approved on-site manager if they're not residing there. They've been advised of that. So that's really not an issue here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. No, Ms. Alley, may I close the public hearing? Okay. The public hearing is now closed. The item is before the board. I guess what I'm wondering is, I'm going to start at this end this time. I'm going to start with Mr. Burkhart. What are your thoughts?
Many, but I'll just focus on one right now. In Mr. Blaine's letter of March 29th, 2023, page 2, toward the, and that's page 22 in our packet, by the way. This is the area that is sort of the sticking point for me. You state the ordinance is not vague in its language regarding accessory homestay uses and the associated primary dwelling. The language from section 5.1.48 B1 is clear and unambiguous. It does not require the interpretation that the primary dwelling be located in the county of Albemarle, only that the homestay be an accessory to such dwelling. I would have to agree with you. I think that it is terribly confusing here, but without having it spelled out in code specifically to that point you raise, I think it opens up to interpretation only. What?
Is that all?
That's it.
Okay.
No stories.
No stories. Okay.
Once-
Mr. Carrington, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to hear from you guys. Pass the baton.
I'm the chair.
Mr. Shepherd. I did that last time. Okay. I want to back into this with sort of a procedural question. I grant I am not clear in my mind right now, and I'm looking for clarity with the attorneys that are here and also hearing more discussion about how to apply the illegal application of the relationship between the two buildings, the accessory versus primary uses. And I know that that could be argued in a lot of ways. However, my starting point with this is within the homestay ordinance, there is a provision for a special exception. And I think when I was also very intrigued with those emails, starting with the first special exception, Nelson County can inspect our solar system. Get excited. Our solar collections, they could, that it's okay for that they have arrangements with other counties and apparently to work out, and sort of divide the work up between who does building inspections. I find that very surprising. I didn't understand, I didn't realize that was the situation. I thought that that boundary was a definite thing, but I learned now perhaps not. But in that same course of that same email thread, when the Harwoods realized that, that they were in violation and got, there was this, Mr. Harwood asks, is there anything I can do? Are there any options? Is there an exception? He asked the staff, if there was an exception available. He's a surgeon. He's not a zoning person. He didn't say, I wish to apply for a specialist exception under code section such and so. But I think it's a fair, you could just understand that he was a property owner asking for a special exception. And I feel like he should have been given the given the opportunity to do that. I would, before I go too much further, are you aware of those discussions and how it went from the violation?
Who are you asking, please?
I'm asking Mrs. Harwood, if you have a recollection of how the conversation went from the receipt of the violation to the request for what can we do? Is there an exception? Do we have options? Can we work this out? To it becoming the determination that it was in violation and your only recourse was this appeal.
Come on up.
I believe my husband did have a phone conversation with the female who had was in charge of this from, I believe, zoning. And I was not the one that had that conversation, but there didn't really feel like there were options. It felt kind of just like, nope, that's our decision. And it didn't feel like we were being taken into consideration despite having a very unique property, right, that is in its way. So I felt like it literally just went kind of like the emails from, hey, what options do we have to, well, the answer is no, which was a little surprising to us because initially when we asked those questions, we thought, okay, there's probably some give and take here. And then we didn't feel that. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yep, thanks.
Okay.
So I don't know how the Board of Supervisors would, what their take on this would be. I don't know what, I realize that all legal advice that the Board of Supervisors gets might be simply that this is illegal. You can't do it. And the board would accept that, from county legal staff. And that might be where this goes. But but as I look at this, I think this is pretty special. I think it's pretty exceptional. It's weird to have to have the two houses on the property, to have the property line through it, the added, and there are other factors, the fact that it's under an easement, it's a single parcel, all these factors that we've been talking about. I would like to avoid trying to make a real sort of like a legal finding and would hope this could be punted to the special exception process, if that's proper and appropriate.
Hold on. Yeah, hold on, because all throughout the staff report, there's reference to the fact that in the Virginia Code, a county has jurisdiction over all the unincorporated territory in the county. A city or town has jurisdiction over all the territory within that municipality, and then the code section is quoted. And Mr. Herrick, do you want to come up? Because I'm assuming that that's what you base this on, is that you cannot call this a primary or an accessory because you don't have the jurisdictional power over Nelson County. So therefore you can't declare that that this was a primary. However, just one more thing is that also within the staff report, it says, it quotes, it says, see Board of Supervisors of Loudoun County, because it's quoting the land use handbook versus the town of Purcellville. And then in brackets, it says, although planning processes may be extraterritorial between counties and towns under the Virginia Code, and it cites another reference. So could you ever consider this a planning process that you could go and talk to Nelson and get some sort of documentation from them that says, okay, yes, we can consider this primary? I mean, isn't that a possibility? And then at that point, couldn't that be brought before the Board of Supervisors as a special exception instead of just saying, we're going to ignore this over here because here's our property line and we can't do anything over there? Because I was also, when Mr. Burkhart brought up the fact that if we have folks that are working in Albemarle in the inspections department and say to the applicant, oh, the majority of this parcel is in Nelson, go get a permit from them. It just seems as if what we're doing here is, I'm sure that no one wants to break the law, but we also think that what's happening here is something that's unintentional. And when they bought the property, they didn't, there's the line. But what I'm wondering is there, as Mr. Shepherd was saying, is there another way that this process can happen?
Right. So the number of questions here, let me try to sort them out one
Okay.
by one.
Okay.
The first question regarding the building permit issue and the solar panels, I would want to have our staff here to say where these solar panels were. I don't know whether these solar panels were entirely on the Nelson side. I'm not sure what the facts were regarding solar panels and how it was determined. So I really can't address that today. In response to Mr. Shepherd's questions about special exceptions, again, this is a matter where a special exception can't be even considered for just anything. The ordinance spells out the specific areas in which special exceptions can be granted. And I'm happy to walk through them with the board with them. Section B2, and by the way, all my references are 5.1.48. Subsection B2 talks about a special exception for a residency. It allows for the board to consider a special exception for a non-resident manager. And as I think Mr. Blaine alluded to, that if this were approved as a use, that these owners would actually need to come back before the Board of Supervisors for that special exception. So that's an example of one special exception. Subsection B3 is about minimum yards and the yard requirements. That's something that can have a special exception granted. Then there's parcel-based regulations in subsection C. We would drop down to subsection C2 because this is a parcel in the rural areas that's more than 5 acres. And there's an allowance for a special exception in C2(2) about structure types. You can see there's a reference that by special exception, the board may authorize a homestay use for structures built after August 7th, 2019. Those are the only special exceptions that can be granted. So that's the area in the ordinance where there's potential wiggle room for an applicant to deviate from the ordinance as written. The board is not, by its own ordinance, it does not have the wiggle room to grant a special exception if under these circumstances where there's supposedly, where we've been told that there's a primary use in another jurisdiction and a secondary use in Albemarle County. They're just, again, there's not a special exception associated with B1, which is each homestay use may be by accessory, must be accessory to a primary residential use. There's not matching language that says, except by special exception, the Board of Supervisors may authorize it if there's a primary use in another jurisdiction. And I would add that the reason that B1 doesn't say each homestay use must be accessory to a primary residential use in Albemarle County is because this is the Albemarle County zoning ordinance, and it's assumed that these provisions apply only in Albemarle County.
So are you also telling me that what is it? 5.1.48, it's D, special exceptions,
Yes.
that unless it's listed 1, 2, 3, that the board can't consider it. So the board couldn't consider that. Nelson said it was okay. The board couldn't consider that this property is under conservation easement and is under those, I don't know, requirements. So the board could only consider 1, 2, and 3 here.
So actually, I'm glad you brought subsection D to my attention, because subsection D1 is actually, I guess, the point I'm trying to make. Waivers or modifications of this subsection may be authorized only by the special exceptions specifically provided in this section. So D1 puts a limit on the special exceptions that can be provided. And in terms of what information can be considered, I suppose that the board could consider information. I mean, we've heard today from non-residents of Albemarle County. And there's no prohibition on considering that information, but then the acts that are allowed to be taken with that information are limited to the 3 that we talked about. Whether accessory uses can be done, whether there's a non-resident manager, and the minimum yards regulations. Those are the only types of special exceptions that can be granted under the homestay ordinance. Not again, a waiver or exception to the primary and accessory use requirements. So there's not a prohibition on considering that information. There is a prohibition on what you do with that information. And so, you know, if the owners here were approved for this, and then they come back for example, the residency, a special exception to allow there to be a non-resident manager, you know, the board can consider appropriate information there. It's just that, again, our zoning administrator lacks the authority to reach into another locality and enforce the zoning ordinance there.
Okay,
That gets us back to Mr. Shepherd's point. I think, I don't want to speak for Mr. Shepherd. Was that where you were going? Before, Madam Chairman,
Excuse me,
talk
Mr.
to,
Bowling, speak into your mic.
Mr. Blaine, and then Mr. Blaine offered to have us, he said, wait a minute, I thought I heard him pipe up and
he
say,
did pipe up.
I have perhaps a solution which may necessitate a deferral, but maybe be appropriate if the board thinks it's appropriate to hear Mr. Blaine at this point.
I would love to. I just needed to get that out and get information from
Yeah,
the
I mean, I
county
think
attorney
Mr.
first.
Mr. Herrick is saying that under the present posture of the.
Excuse me, Mr. Bowling, speak into your mic, please.
Mr. Herrick is saying, as I understand it, under the present posture of the ordinance, that the special exception may not be available. Of course, the board is master of its own ordinances, and if they want to amend the thing or do this or do that or do the other, as long as they comply with appropriate procedures, they can do that too.
I mean, so staff didn't advise the
Yeah.
applicant to follow a procedure that would ultimately be futile, because the board doesn't allow it's not allowed in the ordinance, a
Yeah.
special exception to waive the primary use requirement.
So Mr. Herrick's you answered the question that they didn't advise the applicant to do this because it would have been under the current ordinance structure, it would, as they interpret it, would have been futile. But the applicant may not view that as correct, or he may have a different solution.
Thank you.
Mr. Blaine, do you have a solution?
I have ideas. I don't know, but you have to determine whether there's solutions. And there's really no obligation on the part of the staff to advise clients on, the staff is wonderful. They often do, but there's really no obligation. So there was no expectation there. And I agree with Mr. Herrick's interpretation of that venue of going, or that avenue of going through a special exception. I don't believe it's here. Here, it's an interpretation of the ordinance, which is your job. It's a quasi, as we said at the top of the prior hearing, you're acting as a quasi judicial body. But I disagree that the zoning administrator, the county, has to reach into Nelson County to enforce this homestay ordinance. Because if any of these conditions that are set forth in the homestay ordinance are not met, then they can revoke the permit. So, and it's already been found that zoning administrator put up a slide earlier. That's why we said at the beginning that there's an agreement on the facts. The primary residential use is in Nelson County. You don't even have to go onto the property to determine that. And the accessory use, which is subordinate, it's smaller. The cabin is in Nelson County. And the ordinance literally says that there has to be a primary use, residential use, and your homestay use on the same parcel of land. And those are the facts that are before you. It's not necessary to infer that that only applies in Albemarle County, because that's what the ordinance says. And all of the purposes for why it says that are in this application. And I'd finally add, this is highly unlikely that this circumstance will come up. It's possible, but this is not in my opinion, this is not a precedent setting decision. You may have a view on that, but this only applies, your determination would only apply to these facts in this interpretation.
Of course, it's not a precedent setting decision. It's kind of unique. The legal problem that the board has is that the zoning administrator's decision is presumed correct. There's a presumption of correctness, and burden is on the applicant to overcome that presumption of correctness.
Mr. Bowling, please speak into your mic.
There's
Okay,
one,
Mr.
can I
Carrington.
jump in?
Please
This-
do,
Madam
please do,
Chair.
please do.
There's one element that I think we haven't talked about. I think I agree with plenty of what's been said already. But in the official determination, it seems like Ms. Brumfield essentially says that it can't be an accessory use because there's no primary use. And I think that, again, where we all bring our own skills and hopefully talents to this board, my first place to look was the definition of an accessory use. And I think it's relevant for this board to consider that the first part of that definition, which is the relevant part, says an accessory use, building or structure means a subordinate use, building or structure customarily incidental to and located upon the same lot occupied by the primary use. And so I am having a tough time wrestling with staff's determination that the primary use being located in Nelson prohibits something from complying with the definition of an accessory use, because I think it says the same lot occupied by the primary use. So I think that's relevant for this board to consider as we make our decision.
Yeah, when you look at the homestay section of the ordinance, I think there's like 17 references to parcel. It's like you're talking about the lot. So and that's pretty much what I was thinking. And I looked at by the way, the easement says there are still 3 lots there, just so you know. That's what the easement says. And so, but this particular parcel contains the 3 parcels. One of them contains both the main house and the accessory. But the accessory, obviously, we've all been talking, is located in Albemarle County. But that's kind of the same conclusion that I had come to, is that it's all referencing a parcel and a parcel and a parcel, and not necessarily talking about the parcel outside of Albemarle County. And also, when you read that, the accessory use also focuses in on lot, it says, but I'm going to read it as parcel. And the confusion about, and although we don't know where these solar panels may be located, the confusion about, sort of mixing and matching Albemarle and Nelson depending upon what we're looking at is just kind of confusing. So, Shepherd, what have you got?
Well, the one small slices I'm thinking about is that it seems to me that the the use could be completely regulated on the Albemarle County side of the line. That the purpose of the, that you need the basic concept where you have where the homestay is accessory to a main dwelling implies, and it seems to me that the intent of that, and the purpose of that is that the people in the main dwelling, resident manager or the owners can respond to complaints, like immediate complaints, loud music late at night, or a general complaint, but so that the homestay is managed in Albemarle County, and you could receive Albemarle County could deal with complaints without ever stepping over the county line. So that the accessory nature to a primary use exists here. They can, look across the line and see if the house burned, if the big house burned down or was converted to some other thing, that just with binoculars and staying in Albemarle, never crossing the line, could determine that the necessary functions of the big house as it relates to the homestay be in place. So I think I'm trying to get there, but there's a hurdle, which are the words on the page, and I'm not sure that I have, I don't yet have the clarity of my analysis of how to interpret that's code section to form my vote yet. I'm working on it.
Okay.
I'm getting closer, but I think that the elements of that are required to regulate this use are in place.
Okay. Anybody want to help, John? Like you, Mr. Burkhart?
Yeah, I'd like to go to something on the periphery here, looking at the Virginia Outdoors correspondence that was initially sent to Chester Beatty Jr., prior owner, on March 22nd, page 55 of our agenda packet. Second page, I just want to ask if procedurally you need to do anything with this. On the page 56 at the bottom, site visit, down in observations, it says the property is used for residential use. All structures are well kept and no changes were noted on the property. And of course, that was up to that point. And as I kind of wander through this, well, wait a second. This is a big packet, pardon me. There was the report, the actual document. Yeah, the actual document that memorialized this conservation easement. On page 44, under section 7, industrial or commercial activities, industrial or commercial activities other than the following are prohibited. And they list those, but down on number 3, it says activities that can be and in fact are conducted within permitted buildings without material alteration to the external appearance thereof. Is that a reason why you did not put solar on because that would have been a material alteration of the cabin? Was that one reason you chose not to do it that way? Okay. So would you be obligated under the agreement with the easement to notify them that if approved, that you have a short-term vacation homestay rental operation in place?
I don't believe so because of that list of permitted activities that you just read, because it would be wholly within the existing structures.
Mhm.
But as you know, VOF routinely as part of their steward program, they visit these sites, so they're welcome to know about it.
It's just,
Yeah.
just out of curiosity, I thought I would ask.
They periodically inspect their properties under conservation easement.
Right.
They're pretty aggressive if they don't agree with what's being ongoing with those uses.
Okay. John, are you ready yet? No?
Getting closer.
I'm ready to hear a motion.
Well,
I
the
think
motion could be to affirm the administrative determination. The motion could be to modify the administrative determination. Or the motion could be to reverse the administrative determination. Does anyone have a motion at this point?
Well, I'll make a motion just to keep it moving. I move that we affirm the administrative determination.
Affirm it?
Well, I'm just making a motion that
Okay. Is there a second? Your motion has died. There is no second.
I make a motion that we reverse the administrative determination.
There's a second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Would you like to offer up the reasons that you're moving to reverse the administrative determination?
I think it can be argued that.
Excuse me, Mr. Shepherd, please speak into your mic.
All right. I think it can be argued that the requirements the requirements governing the homestays, specifically the relationship between the primary building and the accessory homestay, that the control and management contemplated by that exist here. And that the regulation of the homestay can be conducted from Albemarle County. And but only that the yes. That they can be, that the conditions of that relationship, that management can be conducted wholly within Albemarle County and only dealing with the structure that's in Albemarle County.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of repeat what you just said. The requirements governing the homestay in relation to the primary building and homestay is that the control and management of the homestay structure exists in Albemarle, and the regulation of the homestay can be regulated in Albemarle County. Is there anything else anyone else would like to add is a reason for reversing the administrative determination?
Does Mr. Carrington's comments have any weight with the board?
Yeah, I guess the thing that sticks out to me is, we're supposed to make a finding of fact. And if I were asked to make a brief finding of fact, it would be that the homestay does indeed satisfy the definition of an accessory use and therefore is permitted.
Is that because it's part of that reason, because perhaps it's on the same lot?
Because of the definition of an accessory use, including the requirement that it be on the same lot.
Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Ally, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Carring, I'm sorry, Mr. Shepherd,
Motion is to reverse.
The motion is to reverse.
please speak in your mic.
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart,
Yes.
Mr. Carrington,
Yes.
Ms. Joseph,
Yes. Okay. You're welcome. So the next order of business is approval of the minutes. Mr. Blaine. What was it? Euclid versus Ambler 1926, just so you
1926.
know.
US Supreme Court.
Yes.
I don't know the site number though, but I bet Andy does. Thank you.
Okay. The minutes were wonderfully brief. And wonderfully, I mean, they said everything that needed to be said, I think. Anyone have any revisions, amendments, questions? If not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented. The minutes of Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023, as presented.
I will second that motion.
Okay, any more discussion on these minutes? No. Would you please call the roll, Ms.
Mr.
Allen?
Carrington,
Yes.
Mr. Burkhart.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd,
Yes.
Ms. Joseph,
Yes. Is there any old business that we need to discuss?
I just want to thank you all for being Americans. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. No old business? How about any new business?
I
Do you have
believe we'll have an
anything?
appeal next month, another one,
Oh, we do have another one next month,
and the meeting date's the 11th.
11th of June.
Thank you.
No, July. Oh, Lord. Linda, July.
All on the ninth.
Oh,
Ready
yikes.
to rock.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the
Oh.
4th is Tuesday, so when we set our schedule, beginning of the year, that was the following week is when we picked that date.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, please know, we really appreciate everything you guys do. If we don't just agree with you, it's nothing personal. So please don't ever take it that way. I appreciate all the hard work, all the time spent doing these things and all the thought. So, and I'm sure the rest of the
Yeah.
board agrees with that. So please, just, we're doing what we think is best. It's not because we want to hammer anybody. So thank you. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys. Yeah,
Thank you.
we want to get paid by the hour, you guys.
Made a lot of money on this.